I still like Newcastle to win their first trophy 70 years later. So they're in the FA Cup and they're in the AFL Cup final. I'll still go with Newcastle to win the AFL. If obviously if they lose against Liverpool, then I would be tempted to go with Newcastle to win the FA Cup. Regardless, I still like Newcastle to win the trophy. And if it does happen, the EFL Cup final, I do like Aston Villa to win the FA Cup for the first time since 1957. So they can win their next trophy 68 years later, their next FA Cup in 68 years. Championship is Camacho 68. It's a big championship number, so it makes sense to win 68 years later. And Unai Emery is a cup specialist, and there's no Chelsea, there's no Arsenal, there's no Liverpool, and you have Emiliano Martinez. So that's why Aston Villa have a strong chance of winning. Their last domestic trophy occurred against Leeds in 1996. So we are looking at roughly 29 years into the future. So that 68 is going to be very big again. And I think it's going to be centered around the goalkeeper. You know, Emiliano Martinez is Camacho of Wembley. Wembley's Camacho 85. I think it's going to be centered around his birthday, I think. September 2nd to the day of the final of the FA Cup. Or what's the day? I think we have to do the FA Cup first. Okay, I see. I gotta do 2024 for his birthday. That's the problem. It's over 36 weeks. Like Argentina win their first World Cup in 36 years. What about the time from the final of Emiliano Martinez victory in the World Cup to the time of this FA Cup? We get around 29 months. I think it 68 years later for their next FA Cup victory. It makes a lot of sense. You know, Emery's Camacho 30. Unai Emery. Emery's 30. 30 years for Aston Villa's next trophy. That'd be next year. Unai Emery 48. Opponents can be 4-8 against Aston Villa in the FA Cup final. I think if you were to kind of test the relationship there, let's do Unai's birthday to the final. His birthday's November the 3rd. So what do we get? A day from his birthday to the final. I mean, we get 28. I know 28's crown, but there's got to be more to it. I think it's the time that he became the Villa manager. October 2022. Just over 30 months later from the time that he became manager, the 31st month, Unai Emery can win a trophy at Wembley. Wembley's 31. And Emery's 30, so maybe over 30 months later, Aston Villa win that trophy with Unai Emery. He wins everywhere he goes. With the exception of Arsenal and PSG, the league was easy. But this is a FA Cup where it makes sense that I think I don't know if Tottenham are out of the FA Cup. Tottenham got knocked out by Aston Villa. Indeed, they did. So it makes sense to go for an underdog in this year's FA Cup because some big clubs have been knocked out of the FA Cup, and 68 years later for the next FA Cup victory makes sense. Championship 68. It's a very big championship number. He usually gets a trophy everywhere he goes. Sevilla, PSG, runner-up, granted, runner-up. Aston Villa makes the most sense to me. Oh, Aston Villa's 125. I'm like, what's 125? Or what's 125 weeks? So let's scale back quickly. Okay, so this is the World Cup final. It's technically 126 weeks, but 125, that's pretty damn close, isn't it? I mean, Ende included 29 months after beating France. France is Camacho 29. Argentina beating France in the finals at London in the FA Cup. London's 25 in reverse. It makes sense for Emiliano Martinez to help win the FA Cup for Aston Villa 29 months later.